Studies in Alchemy by Saint Germain. Preface. The deep meaning of alchemy is simply total composition, implying the relationship of all creation to its component parts. Thus alchemy, when properly understood, refers to the conscious power that controls mutations and transmutations within matter and energy, and even within life itself. It is the science of the mystic and the forte of the self-developed man who, after having searched, comes to discover his oneness with God and is willing to play his part. Saint Germain, Chapter 1. The Law of the Transfer of Energy. 2,000 years ago, when Christ walked upon the waters of the Sea of Galilee, he demonstrated a manifestation of the natural law of levitation acting within an energetic structure of cohesion, adhesion, and magnetism, the very principles that make orbital flight possible. The atoms of light that composed the body of Christ absorbed, by force of will, an additional quantity of cosmic rays and spiritual substance, whose kinship with physical light converted his entire body into light, thereby making it easy for him to walk upon the sea as if it were dry land. His body was a complete ray of light, shining upon the waters. The most dazzling concept of all was his ability to transfer this authority over energies to Peter through the power of the vision that Peter himself had of the Christ in radiant and illuminated manifestation. Yet, when for an instant Peter turned his eyes away from the Christ, a vibration and a vortex of human fear seized him, which immediately densified his body, causing him to sink partially into the raging sea. The comforting hand of Christ, extended in pure love, reunited the alchemical bond, and the spiritual energy flowing from his hand raised Peter once again to safety. Another example of the flow of energy that the Master Jesus caused to emanate, as was the case with the woman who touched the hem of his garment without his knowing it beforehand, demonstrates the impersonal love of God which responds equally to the call of faith of any of the creatures he has so wonderfully and purely formed, with the supreme hope that all might enjoy absolute cosmic freedom. These two examples refer to aspects of the great cosmic law that are not commonly known, but are, in general, discussed or evaded by religious groups. The law of the transfer of energy is essential to the science of alchemy, since, without it, it is impossible to create matter. This law determines that something cannot be created out of nothing. True knowledge of the impersonal law of the transfer of energy is likewise essential to a correct understanding of the great law, because it proves that God, who makes the sun to shine upon the just and the unjust alike, manifests through both. During his mission in Palestine, Jesus declared, "The kingdom of heaven suffereth violence, and the violent take it by force." It must be understood, then, that it is possible to wrest from the hand of God some of the secrets for mastering the forces of nature and controlling matter, even when the individual and his motive are not absolutely pure. But let no one ever believe that he who does so will escape accounting for his actions, for he is fully responsible for every use or abuse of the energies in his world. The reason I chose to begin this, my treatise on alchemy, with a slight admonition and a sober explanation, is not to frighten anyone, but rather to instill in all readers a deep and constant reverence for God, the only fear permitted in our octave. This means, in reality, a sacred awe that engenders in all who love the great law of love the utmost respect and adoration for the wisdom that so admirably and wonderfully created all things in the likeness of undaunted freedom. All who abuse the powers of the universe for selfish purposes will, sooner or later, realize that they must divest themselves of their ill-gotten gains, and the penalty they must suffer for it is truly terrible. To produce substance to feed the poor, to heal a withered hand with a mere touch, to raise the dead, and even to suspend natural law to perform miracles of infinite wonder through the magic of alchemy. This seems to humanity to be the highest use they can make of heaven's grace. Let us embrace the spirit of freedom that enables man, created in the immortal, loving, and divinely free likeness of his Creator, to accomplish these things and many more, for the benefit of society and to the delight of his benefactors. But, above all, let us extol the proper use of the blessed, divine science of spiritual alchemy. The ancient alchemist has always been a picturesque figure, even to his own contemporaries, but time has gilded his image with a glory much greater than he ever possessed, which always happens when we approach aspects of mystery. It is in the simple gifts of life that men are to find their freedom, though its more complex aspects are the progressive expressions of the laws of life, destined to enrich the well-being of this earth and of all its inhabitants, harnessing all that is good in them for the benefit of the most beautiful world of freedom that can ever be conceived, not even in the mind of a new Atlantean. So much for the moment as far as worldly society is concerned. Let us now take into consideration the individual and his respective role in the use of alchemy. The inner meaning of alchemy is simply total composition, which implies the relationship between the whole of creation and its component parts. In this way, and when properly understood, alchemy deals with the conscious power that controls mutations and transmutations within matter and energy, and even within life itself. It is the science of the mystical man and is the forte of the self-realized man who, having searched, realizes that he is one with God and is willing to play his part. Down through the years, men have sought to glorify me because of the fascination created by distance in time and space, which always leads to the enchantment of perspective. Without disparaging myself as a handiwork of the Father, and just like the beloved Jesus and others of the great masters of our brotherhood, I have a special interest in each man obtaining his proper place and the correct understanding of how he is to exercise authority in the universe and in his own world and affairs. Let everyone who begins this study understand that I speak here with a specific purpose, which is to make each of you an alchemist par excellence. This means that you must become familiar on inner levels with the total chemistry of God, and with the way in which each facet of creation manifests in matter, in consciousness, and in your daily life. In order to accomplish this properly, you will have to meditate and reread these lessons many times, calling upon me and upon your divine self, your I Am presence, so that we may illuminate any point that is not immediately clear to you. Once your Christ self, on inner levels, confers upon you the degree of alchemists of the sacred fire, you will immediately become candidates to be admitted to the outer court of the great white brotherhood. This fact in itself is a great incentive for you to become adepts of genuine spiritual alchemy. It has always been a fallacy of human thought to deny the so-called miracles performed in the life of the great avatar Jesus. Nevertheless, he, being a Son of God, revealed to all these powerful formulas which, had they been understood and practiced, would have long ago transformed the planet, converting it into a paradise of perfection. Enough, then, of foolishness and human creations, as Shakespeare would have expressed it. Away, then, with the old, the rot and the musty dust of this shapeless mass. Onward, then, with the eternal vastness of an unbound spirit, a being so free as movement itself seems to be something apart from reality itself, and which projects the image of eternal hope in the tiniest gem or in a drop of dew within a singular bud. I am for the freedom of all lovingly. Saint Germain. Chapter 2. The purpose of your alchemical experiment. The void is sterile energy. The alchemist must develop a sense of the value of time and space, and estimate the opportunity to manipulate both. Freedom is won through search and conquest, but above all through the conquest of the finite self. True mastery of the finite comes through centripetal love, the insistent, almost magnetic call of the soul's heart to its divine source. Only the great influence of the cosmic light of God can free the soul from the shadows that man has created and that keep it captive. Call forth, then, the purity of purpose that will make your creative design good. Relentlessly challenge the lower elements that arise like goblins to disturb and test the initiated plan. Then patiently develop your own divine design, the purpose of your alchemical experiment. The true science of the spirit is more exact than worldly measurements can as yet establish. Therefore, recognize that yourself is the white stone or elixir from which all that you create must proceed, orderly fashioned. If the key ideas are not created within yourselves, who are the alchemists, then all action will result in either misfortune or an imitation of the work of another. Now, if it is God whom you wish to imitate, then it can be sincerely said of you, "Well done." But if it is the vanity of man that you imitate, then your consciousness will remain in a pitiful state. The true self of man, from which every good design proceeds, is worthy of being consulted as to what is fitting to create. Therefore, the true alchemist begins his experiment by communing with himself, in order to perceive the inspiring thoughts from the radiant mind of his Creator. By imitating the lower qualities or lower states of consciousness, society has formed many of its misconceptions. In order to correct these concepts, forge an ennobling culture, and delineate good character, man and society must direct their attention toward noble examples. Let the man who desires to practice alchemy first learn to be a reflection of the great examples of all time, who have used the celestial for their designs. And then, let him learn to select the best qualities of his life, so that alchemy may be employed, as was the divine intention, as the noblest method to attain the desires of the heart right here and now. I strongly suspect that many of my hearers, but few, if any, of the more sincere students, are anxious to receive immediately the philosopher's stone or the magical properties that will turn them, at will, into a combination of Aladdin and Midas, sprinkled with a pinch of benevolence. To those who so think, I declare here that, although in this 9-part treatise I am going to impart extraordinary knowledge concerning the science of alchemy, unless you absorb the secrets of the first lessons with absolute humility, granting me, as your instructor, the privilege of preparing the teachings as God commands me to do, I doubt very much that you will ultimately succeed, and it will be the fault of neither the teaching nor the teacher. I do not intend to deliver a long discourse on the vanities of worldly life. Yet, I would like to point out that by revealing these teachings now, the Brotherhood hopes to preserve our students from repeating the mistakes made by some of the early alchemists, whose sole purpose seemed to be the acquisition of wealth and honors, and the ability to draw from the universal substance the energies to transform base metals into gold. I hasten to tell you that not all of the early alchemists limited their goals to temporary gains. Indeed, many faithful souls dedicated themselves to alchemy with the same reverence with which they would have undertaken the quest for the Holy Grail, considering it a divine art and the origin of the Christian mysteries, as when Christ turned water into wine at the marriage feast of Cana of Galilee. We desire that the original concepts of alchemy receive a new meaning, and that the significance it held in the mystery schools be brought forth, since the uses to which this science is currently applied must be translated to a higher dimension if humanity is to reap the maximum benefits from it. The purpose for which God ordained this spiritual science will remain unfulfilled unless it is applied to free individuals and society from the hustle, confusion, and compromise with the densities of human thought, as is our desire. We who pursue the high calling of the alchemist aspire to see everyone achieve a position where they can both uplift and teach the youth of the world the basic goals of life, showing that they engender far greater pleasures than those merely temporary, which, in reality, are less useful to the divine alchemist than a pacifier to a nursing infant. Let no one think that, because I take this time to make known to you the essentials of the subject, my discourse is not relevant to immediate affairs. Unless each one understands that he must individually exercise his God-given right to use power with wisdom and love, he will not be able to avoid falling into the abysses of self-deception and self-justification. Now, God's plan is that every inhabitant of the earth should strive to understand himself and his destiny. The arrogance born of intellectual pride has caused many sincere students and even several worldly masters of one science or another to fall into the traps of their own creation, and in many cases, they never knew when they fell into the snare. Therefore, if any subject is included here, let no one think he can omit it simply because it already seems familiar to him or because he has considered it before. We place many gems of thought in the least ostentatious sentences, which, even though they are quite plain in their language and easy to see, may demand more than the painstaking scrutiny of even the most sincere heart. St. Peter posed the problem, and if the righteous scarcely be saved, where shall the ungodly and the sinner appear? It is fitting for the aspiring alchemist to understand that alchemy is an exact and true science, the illumination of which is conferred upon man by God himself. Its purpose is to teach men how to obtain for themselves every gift of grace and every virtue that their life streams might require to find the way back to their point of origin in the heart of God. I do not say that you cannot learn to materialize everything that your being desires, this aspect of alchemy being for some the easiest part of the whole, while for others it proves to be the most difficult. What I do say is that more reflection must be given to the design of these desires than to the wonderful science that causes them to manifest from the invisible, since creating a worthy design is a very noble endeavor, worthy of the God we all carry within, the only one who can free man so that he may realize his immortal destiny. We have worked below and waited above so that the children of this world might put an end to the looting and pillage of war, foster the education of the needy, abandon the desire for class distinction, and offer themselves, as princes of the realm would, to effectively satisfy the needs of their impoverished yet noble lineage. We are resolved now to find the faithful of all nations and to empower them with the necessary means, so that they may individually escape the self-imposed bondage of these times and obtain their own priceless heritage. It is understood that this heritage is neither temporary nor ephemeral. At any rate, when I was in Europe working to somewhat lessen the poverty and confusion prevailing there, I did make use of universal alchemy to produce the substance which, although ephemeral in its nature, satisfied many human needs and was both comforting and useful to the world and to the personal lives of my beneficiaries. I see nothing wrong with the idea, nor do I look with disfavor upon the fact of your having a divine source of supply to meet all your needs. However, I do feel it is necessary for you to remain always humble and grateful, since God places in your hands the key to controlling natural forces. Once again, as the most important idea contained herein, I emphasize the constant need to understand the universal scheme or plan of creation, so that everything you design and do may be in harmony with eternal law and cosmic principles. I hope I have not alarmed or discouraged any student of alchemy from continuing with this wonderful divine study. At any rate, I can now proceed with greater delight, since I have magnified the eternally manifest principle of the immortal intelligence of God, which some call inspiration, and others simply the mind of God. Whatever name man may give to a quality, it is the possession of it that counts toward fulfilling the 9 points of the law. Therefore, love the emanation of divine wisdom contained herein which, like the sunlight shining through the trees, touches with its luminous fingers everything it passes through. For only by means of love can you truly possess. I am the resurrection and the life of the cosmic purpose in you. In the name of freedom I remain. Saint Germain. Chapter 3. The Sacred Science. The field of individual destiny is controlled by the interaction of multiple cosmic forces, mostly benign. However, in today's worldly society, because humanity misunderstands both earthly and heavenly purposes, these forces have been inverted toward other ends, frequently chaotic and disintegrating. Originally, alchemy was designed to be an instrument to enrich individual destiny, to make accessible the technique of transforming base metals into gold, and thereby to produce opulence in everything the successful practitioner undertook. The dedication of the early alchemists to discovering the secrets of alchemy was absolute and was sanctified by the coordination between their minds and the work of their hands. These alchemists pursued their experiments even under the burden of persecution led by the entrenched reactionary forces of those days, and it is a tribute to their lives and their honor that they persevered in the quest. Thus they obtained the honest results of their efforts, bequeathing them to humanity as recognized scientific achievements and recorded philosophical knowledge, to the blessing of the culture and archives of this world. Students of this course must realize more and more that I am determined to give to your minds and feelings a new sense of freedom. The wholesome concepts presented here must indicate to your entire being that the key to alchemy, which must precede the acquisition of all other keys, is self-mastery to a greater or lesser degree. The true value of this key must be recognized, since self-mastery is the key to all self-knowledge. Therefore, it must be understood and used at least partially, and you must recognize beyond a doubt that you yourselves are the alchemist who must determine the design of your own creation. Furthermore, you must understand yourselves as the real self and your creation as the product of that self. Some may be surprised to learn that the overflowing vortices of man's discordant thoughts and feelings daily impose a hypnotic effect upon almost all the inhabitants of the earth. These tend to nullify the great concentration of intelligent and creative power that is the heritage of every man, woman, and child on this planet, although very few make conscious use of it. While an increasing number of human beings go in search of freedom, reactionary elements, whether purposely or not, attempt to subjugate the human race, placing new shackles upon it every time it manages to free itself from one form of human bondage or another. To be successful, the alchemist must be aware of his God-given freedom to create and must rid himself of those restrictions and coercions imposed upon the soul as forms of human bondage. Nevertheless, in every case, these must be distinguished from the necessary laws that structure society. Beauty and righteousness must shine on the left hand and on the right hand of the aspiring alchemist to remind him of his responsibility before God and man to contemplate his works before releasing them, ensuring that they are indeed good and beneficial to all men. In these studies on alchemy, I reveal methods of visualization that will provide students, provided they apply them, as I did, with the capacity to render to God and man a service of the first magnitude. I trust that the myth of human equality will fade away and that, in the dignity of equal opportunity, the evolutions of this planetary home will come to know and love the expanding potential of the Christ in all men. In this way, the steady progress of humanity will be characterized by a greater malleability of the soul and less ignorance of man's universal purpose in the development of his individual talents than has existed on Earth up to now. As the early alchemists achieved a degree of success in probing the secrets of the universe, they keenly saw the need to unite and to keep secret some of the discoveries they had made. Out of this need arose various religious orders and secret societies, fragments of which have survived to this day. The need for both suppression and expression was recognized, just as enlightened men of today realize that harmony in society and among nations, and the extirpation of the causes of war and civil strife, eliminate any motive for withholding any knowledge that would be of universal benefit. Let me assert, since I can speak in the light of true knowledge, that the early alchemists were by no means as mediocre as history would have us believe. Their discoveries were manifold, including both secular and religious knowledge, both scientific and philosophical. Above all, they discovered many truths that at later dates became general knowledge. Let not the world despise all those stories that have been told about the suppression of inventions and new ideas for economic and political reasons. When it suited them, those who held high office often instructed their mercenaries to keep secret precisely that knowledge which belongs to all ages and represents the heritage of the inhabitants of all nations. Regardless of such dishonorable conduct, the masters of wisdom will never transmit this knowledge to humanity until the alchemy of reason heals the inner rift of selfishness in a sufficient number of people, so that the selfless hand of justice may forever hold the torch of knowledge. In these first 3 lessons I am preparing your minds to better assimilate the full emanation of the flame of wisdom that has been integrated into this course. Frequently, men have become discouraged by not having a certain piece of information long before it reached their hands. This feeling is certainly understandable, but lamentation devoid of constructive guidance is never beneficial. It is preferable that men perceive that God's hour is reflected in the present moment and not in ancient parchments. The hieroglyphs describing the errors of the past are already fading and can neither refute present truth, nor act as a panacea to remedy what was unfortunately sown. Instead, they serve only as a contrast to amplify the current feeling of gratitude that rejoices in that progress which is manifested today to dispel the ignorance of times past. A resolute dedication to using the energies of the present to pave the way toward mastery of the future is expected of the student of alchemy. Therefore, he must ensure that his current development in the science of alchemy is sufficient to transform the lower qualities of human nature into an altar upon which the flame of the living reality will animate the greatness of the golden age now emerging in the Christ mind. Likewise, his efforts must be sufficient to counteract the torments of worldly injustice. And furthermore, he must work to secure for posterity ever more abundant eras of progress, illumination, happiness, and universal spirituality. Applied by the alchemists, symbols and symbology, properly understood, are literally charged with meaning. For example, Mercury is the symbol of speed and translates to consciousness the thought of a watchful and reverent alertness that quickly endows chemistry with action through the intensity of its application. Salt is equivalent to the idea of individuality and reminds humanity of the need for the individual to preserve the savor of their divine source, rather than preferring the crystallization of identity within the Sodom and Gomorrah of materiality, represented in the historical figure of Lot's wife. Fire, like life, is the catalyst that can be increased by means of the cosmic light contained within cosmic rays, in order to intensify and purify the refulgence of life in the contemplated design. Furthermore, the conscious invocation of life makes doubly secure all the manifestations of the alchemist. Earth symbolizes the natural crystalline densities, created from the energies of spirit and sustained by the beings of the elemental kingdom. These tiny creators, mimicking human discord, have transferred the discordant patterns of humanity to nature. Thus, the convergence of human error upon the planet appeared in the form of thorn, thistle, insect, and beast of prey, and the Pandora's box of astral forms was opened by laggard civilizations, whose misdirected free will and selfishness have perverted the energies of life, even in other planetary systems. It is this discord, imposed upon the very atoms of substance, that the alchemist must eliminate from his laboratory before he can create. It is this dross that the alchemist must purify by fire. I do not expect all readers to immediately understand all the concepts contained in this course. While it is true that I advocate for simplicity in the phraseology of God's basic laws, I am likewise aware that thought patterns, expressed in a loftier style, will yield greater benefit as the world gains the capacity to accept them. Therefore, I include here elements intended to stimulate those at all the different levels of consciousness to study, so that they may approve themselves before the divine flame within themselves. Thus, all who faithfully practice the teachings will achieve individual alchemical progress. The most insidious type of slavery is that in which the prisoner is unaware of his chains. I am certain that the true science of alchemy can serve to free all beings on earth who accept it. Therefore, out of respect for its supreme purpose, I regard it as the sacred science. Remember, blessed children of men, that the purpose of true science must be to increase happiness and to free the human race from every external condition that does not serve to elevate man to the pristine grandeur of his original cosmic purpose. Every postulate, whether of a social, economic, religious, or scientific nature, should be imbued with the freedom that allows men to make progress. Everyone who progressively attempts to carry humanity forward in these fields should recognize that there exists the possibility of change without in any way defying those infallible gears of the human spirit that are called life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Undoubtedly, the opportunity to progress and the freedom to innovate cannot alter the immutability of divine truth nor the integrity of the Word, whose power reveals its language from those limitless heights to which we all aspire together. Progressing with you in the holy science, I am Saint Germain. Chapter 4. Venture. Versatility. I am eternally grateful for this multifaceted quality of creation. The universe is fragmented. From its unifying core, it is scattered into a diversity of light, color, tone, and density. Every participant in a landscape, whether pastoral or of transitory ugliness, should remember that the splintered beams of light rays that make up the mantle of all creation connect directly with the great source and point of origin of cosmic unity. In my historical experiences prior to my ascension, which in its upward action was identical to the raising of Jesus the Christ, I found myself in a constant state of perceptive grace, during which my inner ears and eyes were fixed on a beautiful realm of light and perfection that helped to remove from my consciousness the thorn of earthly life, producing in me a well-being that went unnoticed by my friends. Frequently, they pondered the cause of my inner serenity, without understanding its origin. The contacts I have made with my earthly brothers and the times I have appeared since my ascension were not always under circumstances in which those I met were aware of my identity or my power. Let me humbly state that, as in other similar cases when some member of the ascended hosts chose to draw aside the veil of matter and of illusion, Maya, to contact unascended humanity directly, the latter has entertained angels unawares. I am well aware that some of my readers may be of the opinion, all the more so since I am one of those who have passed beyond the veil, that this publication of my words is of a psychic or spiritualist nature. Let me quickly assert that it is neither. Praise be to God that my own life stream has no need to submit to such forms of limitation. The fact that we are expressing or vibrating our life in higher dimensions, where man's ordinary faculties of seeing and hearing do not function, in no way makes our service or our reality less effective, nor does it compel me to submit to the aforesaid methods of communication. Blessed ones, you do not perceive radio waves by ordinary means, since these remain inaudible until they are detected through the miracle of the electronic tube. Therefore, trust in the ability of heaven to communicate directly with man. Since I have dedicated myself to the holy cause of freedom, ever since my ascension, I have unceasingly maintained contact with one or more life streams in embodiment here on earth, and this by cosmic decree and with the approval of the celestial hierarchy. Beloved Jesus and other great beings of light who have descended in fulfillment of the divine plan likewise appeared to their disciples throughout the centuries and, from time to time, manifest themselves to the men and women of today, with no more effort than is required to tune a radio or television. My purpose in airing the subject of the winged messages from heaven descending from the great cloud of witnesses is not as foreign to alchemy as it might appear at first sight, since this shows you a necessary part of my program for the cause of freedom, of which the present series on alchemy is an integral part. Bear in mind, blessed ones, that the creation of the visible depends entirely upon those essences which are not visible to the naked eye. But the central ideas that occupy the minds of most people, because they have their origin in the transitory effects of human causality, are not of sufficient importance to be worthy of comment or to be established as permanent reality. I am sure you will agree with me that, just as the realm of ordinary human experience becomes monotonous both for great souls and small, it is also a wonderful blessing for the latter to be able to peer into the higher octaves of creation by means of an attuned consciousness, thereby drawing directly the inspiration of the mind and the God of nature. Ignorance and its consequent violation of the law deprive the individual and society of enlightenment. The only remedy is enlightened obedience, together with scientific attention to the details of the law. The benefits of divine wisdom remain unknown to many, who believe that the old, customary theories are adequate to satisfy the demands of the moment and that nothing is required beyond empiricism or the empirical method. In reality, the recognized principles of modern science, only partially true, are incomplete and, consequently, offer an inadequate foundation upon which to support advanced research and the control of the elements. An attitude of complacency prevents progress in any kind of endeavor, whether human or divine. Therefore, grace does not abound where it should. Complacency remains a bulwark of reactive ignorance that prevents humanity from partaking of the abundance that all heaven is waiting to pour out upon those free souls whose purity of heart and innocent nature make them highly receptive to our thoughts. Before providing you with any deeper knowledge of alchemy, I wish to elevate you to that divine nobility which is as real as the light of day and which represents your greatest strength to meet the challenges of tomorrow. This may require some scrutiny of the spirit of those sincere alchemists, whose excursions into the unknown were productive in more than one way. Even those souls who utterly failed to discover a method for converting base metals into gold benefited, beyond what they had ever dreamed, through the blessings they received as a result of their search. Even persecutions served to bring them together into a concentrated unity in a common purpose, which in itself is a feat in the midst of human diversity with its unfortunate tendencies toward greed and selfishness. I cherish the hope that you will prepare yourselves to succeed in your endeavors. Above all, prepare to make the necessary changes in your thoughts and preconceived ideas, which will enable you to emerge victorious. If man expects to succeed in alchemy, which in truth depends on the higher laws of spiritual science, he must foster the faith upon which the strength of his invocation and concentration will rest. The melting of metals, the control of atomic forces, and the directing of electronic energy through the mind of man when acting in higher dimensions prove quite easy once mastery is acquired. Nevertheless, after having depended for many years on the five senses and having consequently accepted mortal limitation, I am convinced that you can realize how absolutely important it is that you adjust your thinking to new possibilities, so that it may function free from human restrictions and the dampening of divine ardor by those who, out of ignorance, claim impossible. Let me say to everyone in the name of freedom, try, as you prepare your consciousness to receive the knowledge of tomorrow, be conscious, then, of the need to reflect upon the origin of concepts concerning limitations. My beloved ones, you must be reasonable and balanced in all your actions, but bear in mind that true science borders on the miraculous for those who do not understand its formulas. You approach a solid wall with the idea that you cannot pass through it, yet it is not solid at all but has as many holes as chicken wire. You cannot walk on hot coals without burning your feet, and yet sorcerers of cultures less enlightened than your own do so without getting hurt. Countless miracles of Christ have been reproduced by men and women of different eras and regions since his wonderful advent, and yet, due to human skepticism and forgetfulness, all this wonder has been relegated to the realm of myth or the imagination of gullible minds. I would plead here for the renewal of faith in the power of God, since this is a requirement for anyone who aspires to be a prodigious man of spiritual feats for the benefit of the holy objectives of the universal law itself. Without faith it is not only impossible to please God, but I declare to you that it is impossible to manifest the perfection of his laws. Since faith is such a great requirement, would it not be highly beneficial for everyone to re-examine their motives for doubting? Mark well that most doubts arise from patterns of self-deception, from the practice of fraud, and from the failure of the human mind to carry out its professed integrity. Recognizing, then, that such negative conditions derive from a consent to error, would it not be far wiser for all to turn their gaze toward me and live? With God, all things are possible. Yet, as in any other science, mastery is generally not acquired without knowledge and its persistent application. The few who are the exception to this rule could be called geniuses, but when the law is understood in its entirety, it will be proven that even they had their hours of diligent study and practice. I wish especially to point out that, in revealing the alchemical secrets in this course, our purpose is to place in your hands and in the laboratory of your consciousness the knowledge of the law, the very law that we ourselves have used through the centuries with the greatest success, and with that reverence for life which is of utmost necessity to the inquisitive mind, balanced as it is by the loving intent of a sincere heart. Here, vain curiosity is replaced by the moral grandeur that elevates man above his peers, transforming him into a divine star in the firmament of his contemporaries. Exalted, then, not by false pride or intellectual misunderstandings, the true alchemist maintains a humble bearing, fixing his expectant gaze upon the Master, who will impart to him the invaluable knowledge of the ages, provided his attitude and dedication are correct. May I cherish the tender hope that you will reread the first lessons and assimilate from them a new sense of progress and new possibilities? I am determined that many in this class shall succeed, and I will continue to do my part up and down in your octave so that this may be fulfilled, and that a great illumination, hope, peace, and understanding may be born and renewed in you all. I remain faithfully yours, Saint Germain. Chapter 5. Necessity, Power, and Motive for Change. The moment of the present hour must be used as a chalice of spiritual opportunity. Life must see itself fulfilled in its highest objectives, honored by devotion to uplifting principles, and earned through selfless service. My beloved, the power to change lies within every man. Give preference to this power, revere it above any limiting condition, and watch the alchemy of the self expand. Transmute the lies of a dark substance that prevent your souls from soaring upward. Recognize that the conditions of all human limitation are but phantoms parading on the stage of mortal existence, for the sole purpose of being buried forever by eternal reality. Every man must be conscious of his alternatives and choose either freedom or captivity as he explores the chemistry of his present state, focusing it in the mirror of truth and then deciding to change every base condition, thereby building, within the crucible of the moment, that sacred progress born of eternal perception. Destroy, then, the base and foolish delusion of thinking that you have your origin in matter, that possessive nature, a perversion of the mother which, unable to estimate all cosmic possibilities, limits itself to the trifles and baubles of temporary possession. Allow heaven to use your consciousness to expand your vision toward the infinite, and then behold, at last, the beautiful possibilities that exist in the most desperate external conditions. Give abundance to the poor in spirit, understanding to the rich, and mercy to all. It often happens that a life stream possesses in abundance precisely those qualities of which his neighbor is destitute. Exchange your virtues, elevating the valleys of your neighbor, and trust that life will level the peaks of both his pride and your own. Transmute those undesirable conditions of your world, making a resolute and persistent effort. Every divine being who exalts the life of God within you knows that the power to do these things is in your hands right now, within reach of your intelligence and spirit. Build those spirals of achievement that compose the heavenly city, and envelop the world of physical substance, the conscious mind, and the feelings of your hearts with the radiance of the immortal spheres. As you contemplate the universe with renewed hope, recognize the necessity of maintaining the right attitude. Vanity has prevailed on earth for too long. Wonderful opportunities, like spirits in the night, have vanished with the dawn, bound by the cold shackles that enclose the soul in a cloak of disintegrating elements descending in the hourglass. The son of Elizabeth asked Christ, "Are you he who was to come, or do we look for another?" Christ's reply referred to his miraculous acts. The deaf heard, the blind saw, and the lame walked. The lesson contained in his answer urges every life stream to accept the greatness of its own reality. Everyone should recognize that life has given them its great and wonderful gifts through the consciousness of the I am He, who must emerge from the cave of materialism. The crass separation of the whole into deficient and incomplete component parts, the concept that men have of themselves as particles far removed from their source, forces them to struggle with human misfortune, instead of accepting the grand concept of cooperative unity, which is charged with the power of limitless love and freedom. Truth elevates all and defeats none but the enemies of righteousness, whose dark mistakes make them little more than wild beasts in the jungle of human creation. Life has even given them more mercy than they deserve. This I know because I have the record before me. Beloved Kuan Yin has pleaded for mercy and has given it generously to all, limitlessly and freely. This is the great gift of God. He always returns to life more love than life ever gives to him. Selflessly, the greatness of God pours forth torrents of love when a few drops would suffice, advancing humanity on its upward path of pilgrimage, regardless of erroneous human notions. Now, depending on others is not the solution to your problems, nor will it serve to fulfill the plan that God has designed for you, blessed children of man. As alchemists illumined by the torch of divine knowledge and conscious of the magnificence of true individuality, you must evoke strength from the invisible realm and use the procedures of transmutative alchemy in your worlds and affairs to daily overcome all external conditions by spiritual means and physical instruments that are at your disposal. You will not always be asked to make bricks without straw, which may seem exceedingly difficult, but to the determined alchemist, it is merely an obstacle to be overcome. No one currently inhabiting the earth should limit their understanding of the concept of now is the accepted time, which rides every wave of opposition and carries it to the crest of victory. Each one should consider that his life at any age or time is capable of improvement, and that he himself has the capacity to overcome, by force of will, any condition. Law and justice are the natural factors of control, but the universe, guided by its own law, has the creative methods to transcend that law, drawing cosmic dimensions closer and expanding geometrically into the infinite. The friends of freedom must reject old ideas as quickly as they can and discard outdated concepts like outmoded clothing. In the time of Christopher Columbus, humanity could hardly accept the fact that the world was round, submitting dogmatically to the theory that the earth was flat. Chemical formulas of both basic and complex matter are simple to the chemist, yet to the unlearned they seem only a tangle of symbols. Our objective in this course is not solely to provide knowledge, but rather to foster in you the acceptance of it by means of an almost a priori methodology. This is required because the categorical proof of alchemical laws is universally and necessarily evidenced by the effect they have upon man. May there be light within your personal realm and within the sphere of your being. Life is not an experiment, although men have experimented with it. Humanity has followed the current of the peripheral world of effects, neglecting the inner causative realm. All misery is rooted in the basic factors of cause. Correct the defects and you will heal, discovering yourselves. I am interested in completely overturning harmful human attitudes and replacing them with correct methods and concepts, so that all life may swiftly transcend the human energy field of heavy and gravitational magnetism that prevents humanity from progressively ascending. Let every aspiring alchemist first proceed to transform themselves here and now, by means of transmutation, thereby gaining an inner peace and a sense of outer realization, especially at the conclusion of each span of life. Undoubtedly, the intensity of man's positive control, which has the power to alter substance from within and without, cannot manifest the blessing designed by God for all to enjoy and make daily use of, unless a focus both inner and outer is maintained, where the good is accentuated. My beloved ones, living to receive reward or punishment is not the reason for being. The majority of Earth's inhabitants have not rationally understood the intrinsic destiny of life, which is anchored in only a few. Daily, thousands of people find satisfaction in betting, racing, or games of chance, hoping to win despite tremendous odds, since they ignore the surest law of all, cosmic design. Those who deny God or life itself do so for lack of a genuine experience. They have not experienced within themselves the dawn of pure reason. They prefer to accept popular ideas associated with the attitude of refusing to be gullible. Legion, then, are the losses suffered by people such as these. And while I do not hope to change every one of those individuals, I advise here once more that everyone feel inspired to keep persevering. The quest is worth every effort. I know the law, the alchemy of action proves itself. Those who wish to enter into an argument to prove the non-existence or the non-essentiality of a first cause may not want to deprive themselves of the fleeting pleasure of it. On the other hand, if they submit to divine logic, the golden grain of truth will replace the husks of pride found in the suffocating and impenetrable systems of the human intellect, which disdains to verify any knowledge not experienced by the physical senses. Frequently, individuals enjoy imagining that they are closely related to the venerable sages. Now, I believe that the centuries I lived before ascending, and those that have elapsed since then, authorize me to make certain distinctions in this regard. Neither vanity nor human motives could inspire me to write this series. I have in mind only the profound love I feel for the earth as a unit in its cosmic progress, and I wish to convey here something of the sweet simplicity of this love and the wisdom it guides. Let us now see how reasonable it is to suppose that a sufficient number of people serving harmoniously can change even the most petrified condition, creating a flow of love that will traverse peaks and valleys, inspiring the bridging of the gap between the reality of eternal alchemy and the artificiality arising from the caves of degrading errors. Then, the gold of personal integrity and integration that emerges will be a gift shared equally by all. The individual will reflect absolute genius and society the heavenly kingdom. The forces that would bind humanity to its past errors, preventing the flame of peace from being kindled in the present, must in turn be bound in heaven as on earth. And humanity must rise up to toll the death knell for these forces here and now, before the war ends. Only in the true understanding of life and the alchemy of being can one be freed from confusion. Step by step, I am leading you to the correct understanding of alchemy. In the first lessons, I reminded you of your responsibility to prove the law of your own being, making due use of alchemy. Now, I bring to your remembrance the necessity of making changes in yourselves where they are advantageous. Finally, I will teach you the art and practice of precipitation. A prerequisite for applying the methods of precipitation is knowing what you wish to precipitate. This is the truth that Jesus taught in the Lord's Prayer and when he said, "Not my will, but thine be done." The will of God, the will of the Most High, is the will of your real self, of the most important part of yourselves. Since the lower self, even though it still has the capacity to contact the higher self through the soul, is nothing more than a bundle of impulses, stuffed with particles of human knowledge, I recommend that you come to know the reality of your being, as this reality is the genius within you that can grant Aladdin the legitimate desires of his immortal being. Reflect now upon the necessity of changing, upon the power to change, and upon the motive for changing, in order to develop from the fleeting flame of earnestness the permanent sun of renewed hope. Graciously, I am Saint Germain. Chapter 6. Molding Factors. Ah, the mold! There lies the problem. Yes, indeed, the mold also contaminates. But how beautiful was God's hope in creating each life stream. After the descent into the world of form and material substance, the formative years take place, in which both boisterous and silent pressures leave their impression upon the virginal whiteness of the individual's consciousness. beginning with the first affectionate glance of wide-eyed parents and relatives. A series of environmental factors gradually accumulates, serving to create patterns and concepts on the tender screen of the embryonic mind. These molding factors continue to exert their multifaceted influences upon the plastic personality of man. This individuality, then, which at first identifies totally with the good of God, is affected and molded by countless patterns of experience. Thus, example sculpts the mind and being of man, whether for good or for ill. Do you want access to this and all the complete audiobooks on the channel, plus the ebook version? Click the link in the description or scan the QR code in the left corner of the screen to access our library, where you can listen to your favorite esoteric books without ad interruptions, lock your screen, or use other apps while the narration plays, and even download the ebook version to follow along as you listen. Listen on your computer via web browser, or download the app from the Play Store. After subscribing, you will receive an email with your login details, password, and step-by-step instructions on how to access the books through the Hotmart app.